Captain Mackenzie Mack Reynolds stood at the viewport of his cargo ship, the reasonable doubt, but staring into the vast emptiness of space and wondering not for the first time how his life had come to this. Once upon a time, he'd been the pride of Earth's diplomatic corps. Now he was hauling fertilizer components to a colony on Europa and dodging creditors across 3-star systems. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Ganymede Station," announced Dave, the ship's AI assistant. Dave had been programmed with a distinguished and very eloquent personality matrix, which was marketing speak for condescending know-it-all. "Who's calling? If it's Barton from the loan office again, tell him I died heroically saving orphans from a reactor breach." "That excuse was employed 3 weeks ago, Captain. Might I suggest varying your fictional demises to maintain plausibility?" Dave's voice carried that uniquely artificial tone of judgment that only a machine intelligence could perfect. However, it appears to be an official communication from the Galactic Council itself. Mack choked on his coffee. "The Council? What the hell do those stuck-up bureaucrats want with us?" "Perhaps they've finally developed an appreciation for your unique diplomatic skills, Captain. Your last interaction with the Council was quite memorable." "If by memorable you mean resulted in my dishonorable discharge and a lifetime ban from the diplomatic service, then sure." Mack sighed. "Fine, put them through to my quarters. And tell Zoe and Lex to meet me there in 5. As Mack trudged down the corridor of his ship, a vessel generous observers might call vintage and honest ones would call a flying tetanus risk, he reflected on humanity's peculiar position in the galactic community. Earth had stumbled onto faster-than-light travel well before developing the cultural sophistication expected of spacefaring races. The result was that humans were viewed by most alien civilizations as the galaxy's hillbillies, crude, unpredictable, and embarrassingly direct. The door to his quarters hissed open with a concerning metallic groan. Inside, engineer Zoe Blackwell was already tinkering with the ancient holographic projector. "This thing's projection quality is worse than those ancient Earth movies my grandpa used to watch," she muttered, adjusting something with a tool that looked suspiciously homemade. Zoe was brilliant with machines but possessed all the social graces of a particularly grumpy cat. Her perpetually oil-stained overalls and wild red hair completed the image of someone who cared about functionality over form. "Can you fix it before the call?" Mack asked. "Maybe if you'd let me replace parts instead of making me cannibalize the toaster again." The door slid open again to admit Lex Thorne, the ship's head of security, which was a fancy title for the person who occasionally shoots at pirates. 6.5 feet of pure muscle and attitude, Lex had joined the crew after a disastrous stint in the Earth Defense Force that ended with him punching a superior officer. The story changed depending on how much he'd had to drink, but it always ended with the same conclusion. Lex had issues with authority. Today he was carrying his favorite weapon, a modified pulse rifle he'd affectionately named Diplomacy. "What's so important it interrupted my workout?" Lex grumbled. "The Galactic Council is calling," Mack replied. Lex's eyebrows shot up. "The same Galactic Council that you told to perform anatomically impossible acts upon themselves? Those guys?" "The very same." The holographic projector flared to life, revealing the stern visage of Council President Joe Lack, a Thraxian whose blue-tinged face was dominated by 4 eyes and an expression of perpetual constipation. "Captain Reynolds," the alien said without preamble. "How unexpected to find you still operating a vessel." "Always a pleasure, Joe Lack. Love what you've done with your facial tentacles. New moisturizer?" The Council President's appendages twitched in irritation. "We have a situation, Reynolds. One that, regrettably, requires your unique approach." "My unique approach got me kicked out of the service and blacklisted from every diplomatic post in human space. Precisely why we need you. The Vrex Collective has issued an ultimatum to Earth. They're demanding access to military-grade plasma technology, or they threaten to demonstrate their power by destroying a major population center." Mack straightened up. "The Vrex? Those 6 armed zealots from the Horsehead Nebula?" "The same. Earth's diplomats have attempted standard negotiation protocols, but the Vrex ambassador refuses to engage in traditional discourse." So you want the one human diplomat infamous for telling the Andromedan High Chancellor to shove his policy so far up his breathing apparatus it would exit his secondary nostrils? A pained expression crossed Joe Lack's face. The Council believes that the Vrex might respond to alternative diplomatic approaches. You mean you want someone expendable to take the fall when things go sideways? Your ship will be temporarily commissioned as an official diplomatic vessel. All expenses paid, plus a substantial completion bonus. Mack exchanged glances with his crew. Zoe mouthed, "We need the money," while Lex silently patted his weapon with an unsettling gleam in his eye. "Send the coordinates," Mack said finally. "But I'm not wearing the formal diplomatic uniform. Last time I tried, I got a rash in places I didn't know could rash." "The Galactic Council thanks you for your service," Joe Lack said without a hint of sincerity before the transmission cut off. "Dave," Mack called out to the ship's AI, "set a course for wherever the hell we need to go to save Earth from warmongering aliens." Again. "Course set, Captain. Shall I also prepare your usual diplomatic toolkit? The whiskey, the backup whiskey, and the emergency whiskey?" "You know me too well, Dave. Too well." The reasonable doubt dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that suggested at least 3 system failures Zoe would have to fix later. Before them loomed the imposing silhouette of the Galactic Council's neutral ground station, a massive revolving structure shaped like a flattened disc with spindly arms extending in every direction, designed to accommodate diplomatic missions from over 50 different species. "So," Lex said as they approached the docking bay, "what exactly was this incident that got you fired?" "I've heard rumors, but..." Mack grimaced. "Let's just say it involved the Arcturian ambassador. 3 bottles of what I thought was brandy but turned out to be ceremonial embalming fluid, and an impromptu reshuffling of the galactic territorial boundaries. That doesn't sound so bad. I also may have accidentally declared war on a sentient gas cloud." Zoe snorted. "How do you accidentally declare war?" "Their language is entirely based on flatulence. My translator had a hiccup." As the ship docked with a concerning clang, a delegation was already waiting for them. Standing at the front was a harried-looking human representative from Earth's diplomatic corps, a man whose tailored suit and perfectly combed hair contrasted sharply with the reasonable doubt's ragtag crew. "Captain Reynolds," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm Diplomatic Liaison Marcus Chen. Thank you for answering the Council's call on such short notice." "Didn't have much choice," Mack replied, ignoring the outstretched hand. "So what's the deal with these Vrex? I thought they were isolationists who believed all other species were beneath them." Chen's professional facade cracked slightly. "They were. Until they developed a weapon capable of destabilizing planetary cores. Now they're suddenly very interested in interstellar relations. Let me guess, they've been systematically working their way through the galaxy, extorting technology and resources by threatening planetary destruction." "Precisely. Earth is simply the latest target. We've already lost contact with 2 colony outposts that refuse their demands." Zoe whistled. "Core destabilization? That's theoretical tech. No one's supposed to have that yet." "The Vrex ambassador and his delegation arrived yesterday," Chen continued. "They've taken over the station's main conference room and refused to speak with anyone but Earth's ultimate authority." Mack raised an eyebrow. "And instead they get me? That's going to disappoint them considerably. The Council believes that Earth should handle this situation, given our species' reputation for creative problem-solving." "You mean our reputation for being unpredictable and occasionally violent?" Lex translated with a grin. "The Vrex will see you in 1 hour," Chen said, ignoring the comment. "I strongly advise against bringing weapons to the meeting." Lex patted his pulse rifle. "This isn't a weapon. It's a negotiation facilitator." Chen looked like he was developing a migraine. "Captain Reynolds, please understand the gravity of this situation. Earth's safety depends on how you handle these negotiations." Mack's usual smirk faded. "I understand perfectly, Chen. Contrary to popular belief, I didn't become a diplomat because I enjoy making alien species uncomfortable. Well, not only because of that. As Chen walked away, Zoe turned to Mack. So what's the plan, Captain? Please tell me you have one. Of course I have a plan, Mack replied. Step 1, meet the terrorists. Step 2, figure out why they're really here. Step 3, improvise wildly. That's not a plan, Zoe groaned. That's a recipe for interplanetary disaster. Dave, Mack called to the ship's AI through his comm unit. I need you to pull everything you can find on the Vrex. Cultural weaknesses, psychological pressure points, embarrassing historical defeats, the works. Already compiling the data, Captain, Dave responded. May I suggest wearing something more impressive than your current attire? Studies indicate that the Vrex respond positively to displays of opulence. Mack looked down at his worn cargo pants and battered leather jacket. This is as opulent as it gets, Dave. 1 hour later, the crew of the Reasonable Doubt stood outside the main conference room. Lex had reluctantly left his negotiation facilitator behind but was undoubtedly carrying at least 3 concealed weapons. Zoe had attempted to clean the engine grease from her hands but had only succeeded in spreading it to her face. And Mack, well, Mack had donned his idea of diplomatic attire, his slightly less worn jacket and a necktie clipped onto his collared shirt. Remember, Mack said quietly, let me do the talking. The Vrex respect confidence and direct communication. That's actually incorrect, Captain. Dave's voice came through their earpieces. The Vrex cultural database indicates they value elaborate courtesy rituals and consider direct speech to be deeply offensive. Perfect, Mack grinned. Then they're going to absolutely hate me. The doors to the conference room slid open to reveal a scene straight out of a space opera. The Vrex delegation sat on elevated platforms, their 6-armed, insectoid forms draped in iridescent robes that shimmered under the room's lighting. At the center, on the highest platform, sat Ambassador Thrax, distinguishable by the elaborate headdress that framed his mandibles and compound eyes. You stand in the presence of His Eminence, Ambassador Thrax of the glorious Vrex Collective, announced a translator drone hovering beside the ambassador. Approach with deference and prepare to receive the collective's demands. Mack walked straight to the center of the room, hands in pockets, and looked up at Thrax with a casual nod. Hey there, Mack Reynolds, representing Earth. Nice headgear. Compensating for something? The room went deadly silent. The translator drone actually wobbled in the air, as if suffering a mechanical stroke. Ambassador Thrax's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Vrex equivalent of sputtering in indignation. This is the representative Earth sends? This disheveled creature? I bathed this month and everything, Mack replied with a shrug. So I hear you're threatening to crack my planet open like an egg unless we give you our plasma tech. That's not very neighborly. Thrax's compound eyes seemed to bulge. The Vrex Collective does not engage in neighborly relations. We are the supreme technological civilization of this galaxy. You will provide us with your military-grade plasma containment schematics, or we will demonstrate our power on your Sydney urban center. Yeah, about that, Mack leaned against a nearby railing. I've got 2 questions. First, why do you need our plasma tech when you've supposedly got fancy core destabilizing weapons? Seems like a downgrade. And second, what makes you think Earth negotiates with terrorists? The ambassador's translator drone emitted a high-pitched whine as it processed this response. The human uses offensive terminology. The Vrex Collective are not terrorists. We are technology redistributors. Tomato, tomato, Mack waved dismissively. You threaten to kill innocent people unless you get technology you haven't earned. Where I come from, that's terrorism, plain and simple. Thrax rose to his full height in impressive 9 feet of chitinous rage. You will regret this disrespect. The Vrex Collective has obtained compliance from 17 civilizations. The Betelgeusians surrendered their quantum computation matrices within hours of our arrival. The Procyon Confederation yielded their entire antimatter production facilities. Fascinating, Mack said, feigning a yawn. So you've been shopping your way across the galaxy, collecting technologies like trading cards. Let me guess, with each new acquisition, you need the next piece to make it all work together. And somehow human plasma containment is on your shopping list. For the first time, Vrex seemed thrown off balance. One of his subordinates chittered nervously to him. Your primitive psychological tactics will not work, human, Vrex finally responded. You have 48 Earth hours to deliver the plasma containment schematics, or Sydney will become a molten crater. This meeting is concluded. As the Vrex delegation filed out of the room, Zoe whispered, "That went well." "Actually," Max said with a thoughtful expression, "I think it did." "Dave, did you catch all that?" "Every excruciating second of your diplomatic malpractice, Captain," the AI responded. "However, I did detect several anomalies in Ambassador Vrex's physiological responses." "Like what?" "Mandible tremors consistent with deception when discussing their core destabilizing technology. Additionally, their reaction to your speculation about technology collection was statistically significant." Mack grinned. "Which means I hit a nerve. Looks like we need to figure out what they're really building and why they need our tech to complete it." Diplomatic liaison Chen burst into the room, face flushed with panic. "What happened?" "The Vrex delegation just stormed past me looking like they were ready to declare war on the entire human race." "That's actually a normal look for them," Max said. "But don't worry, we've got 48 hours to solve this problem." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Max's grin widened. "The old-fashioned human way, we're going to mess with their heads until they crack." Back on the reasonable doubt, Mack gathered his crew in what generously could be called the ship's conference room. In reality, it was the galley with the food processor pushed against the wall. Zoe was furiously sketching diagrams on a tablet, while Lex cleaned a disassembled blaster that he definitely wasn't supposed to have brought aboard the diplomatic station. "So what's our play, Captain?" Lex asked, reassembling his weapon with practiced ease. "I vote we sneak aboard their ship and plant some explosives. Hard to make threats when your own vessel is in pieces." "As refreshingly direct as that approach is," Mack replied, "I'm thinking of something with fewer interspecies war crimes." "Dave has compiled the analysis you requested, Captain," the AI announced. "The Vrex Collective's technological acquisitions form a pattern consistent with components for a quantum displacement device." Zoe's head snapped up from her tablet. "A what now?" "Theoretically, such a device could shift matter between dimensional planes. In layman's terms, a weapon that could make things simply cease to exist in our reality." "Well, that sounds horrific," Max said cheerfully. "And they need our plasma containment tech because..." "Human plasma containment systems are unique in their ability to maintain stability under dimensional stress. The Vrex likely need this capability to prevent their weapon from collapsing reality around itself during activation. So they're building a doomsday device that could accidentally erase them from existence. And they need our tech to make it safe?" Lex laughed. "That's actually kind of pathetic." Mack paced the small room, thinking. "Dave, what do we know about Vrex psychology?" "The Vrex exhibit several exploitable psychological vulnerabilities. They are pathologically obsessed with appearing superior, suffer from extreme confirmation bias, and have an almost religious reverence for technological advancement." "And how do they handle uncertainty and unpredictability?" "Poorly, Captain. Their social structure is rigidly hierarchical, and their scientific approach is entirely deterministic. Chaotic variables cause them significant cognitive distress." A slow smile spread across Mack's face. "Perfect. You know what humans excel at? Being chaotic variables." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we psychologically torture an alien species into backing down from their threats?" "I prefer to call it aggressive negotiation enhancement," Mack replied. "Dave, I need you to hack into the station's environmental controls, communication systems, and whatever else you can access without getting caught." "Captain, I feel obligated to point out that interfering with neutral ground station systems violates at least 17 different diplomatic protocols." "Noted. Do it anyway." Over the next few hours, Operation Mess with Their Heads took shape. Zoe repurposed sensor equipment to monitor the Vrex delegation's activities and communications. Lex implemented a series of increasingly annoying security measures around the human quarters. And Dave, despite his protests, infiltrated the station's systems with disturbing ease. The Vrex delegation has established a rigid schedule, Dave reported. They eat, rest, and communicate with their vessel at precisely the same times each day. Not anymore, they don't, Mack said. Let's introduce some human unpredictability into their lives. It started small. The environmental controls in the Vrex quarters began to fluctuate, nothing dramatic, just enough to make the temperature and humidity shift slightly beyond their comfort range. The lighting would occasionally flicker. Their communications would experience random delays and distortions. Meanwhile, Mack submitted an official response to their demands, a 500-page document written in intentionally convoluted diplomatic language that contained absolutely no substantive information or commitments. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation that would make any government proud. Ambassador Thrax is requesting another meeting, Dave announced after 12 hours of sustained annoyance. Tell him I'm busy with urgent consultations, Mack replied. I can see him in, let's say, 9 hours. The ambassador appears to be experiencing significant frustration. His latest internal communication contained the Vrex equivalent of 17 distinct profanities. Only 17? We're slacking off. Zoe, how's our special project coming along? The engineer looked up from a device she was assembling. Almost done. But are you sure about this? It's not exactly standard diplomatic procedure. Standard procedure is what got Earth into this mess, Mack said. Sometimes you need to fight fire with a flamethrower. By the time Mack finally agreed to meet with Thrax again, the ambassador was visibly agitated. All 6 of his arms twitched sporadically, and his mandibles clicked in an irregular pattern that the translator drone was struggling to interpret. You have deliberately delayed these proceedings, Thrax accused as soon as Mack entered the conference room. The Vrex Collective does not tolerate such disrespect. Sorry about that, Mack said, not looking sorry at all. I was reviewing your technological acquisitions list. Impressive collection. Almost like you're building something big. Thrax's compound eyes narrowed. Our technological purposes are none of your concern. Your only concern should be compliance. See, that's where you're wrong. Mack sat down and put his boots up on the conference table. Humans are naturally curious creatures. We see someone collecting doomsday device parts, we get interested. Especially when they need our tech to stop their fancy weapon from collapsing in on itself like a poorly constructed souffle. For a moment, Thrax went completely still, a sign of extreme shock in Vrex body language. You cannot possibly know. What you're building? A quantum displacement device, right? Nasty piece of work. Very impressive. Also incredibly stupid. Stupid? Stupid? Thrax's translator drone actually had to adjust its volume settings. The quantum displacer is the most advanced weapon ever conceived. When completed, it will give the Vrex Collective absolute power over all galactic civilizations. If it doesn't wipe you from existence first, Mack shrugged. But hey, that's your business. I'm just here to tell you that Earth won't be contributing to your science project. Thrax leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening hiss. Then Sydney will be the first of many human cities to perish. About that, Mack pulled out a small device Zoe had constructed. We've been monitoring your communications with your ship. Interesting design flaws in your core destabilizer. Very inefficient power distribution. Or possible. Our communications are encrypted beyond your primitive capabilities. Yeah, we cracked that in the first hour. Your encryption is based on a mathematical principle that human children use in puzzle books. This was a complete lie, but Dave had identified several weaknesses that made it plausible. The point is, we've analyzed your weapon, and guess what? It's a dud. Nenner. You dare. Oh, I dare. Your core destabilizer would barely cause a magnitude 7 earthquake. Destructive, sure, but hardly the planet cracker you've been advertising. Nice try, though. Thrax's chittering became so intense that his translator drone temporarily shut down from processing overload. Here's what's going to happen, Mack continued calmly. You're going to take your half-baked doomsday device and leave Earth space. In return, we won't share our analysis of your weapon's weaknesses with every species you've threatened. The Vrex Collective does not yield to threats. It's not a threat, it's a promise. And unlike some species I could mention, humans keep our promises, especially the unpleasant ones. Thrax's mandibles clacked furiously. You have until tomorrow to reconsider your position, human. The Vrex Collective will not be denied. As the ambassador stomped out, Lex entered from a side door. That went well. Better than you think, Mack grinned. Did you plant the device? Lex held up a small tracker, right on his fancy robes. We'll know exactly where he goes and what he says. Perfect. Now we move to Phase 2. Phase 2 began with a seemingly innocent query from Earth's diplomatic corps to the Galactic Council. A formal request for information about all planets and outposts where the Vrex had recently conducted negotiations. This information was, of course, public record and exactly what Mack needed. The pattern is clear, Dave reported after analyzing the data. The Vrex have systematically extorted technology from 17 different species. However, they have not actually destroyed any planets or major settlements. Because they can't, Mack concluded. Their weapon doesn't work as advertised. They're bluffing their way across the galaxy, collecting the pieces they need to build the real thing. Meanwhile, Zoe had been working on something special, a modified scanner that, when activated, would create the electromagnetic signature of a massive power surge from the human quarters. It'll look like we're powering up something big, she explained, something that could theoretically detect quantum displacement fields and neutralize them. And are we actually building such a device? Lex asked hopefully. Of course not. That's impossible with our current technology, Zoe snorted. But the Vrex don't know that. As the final hours of the ultimatum ticked down, Mack arranged for rumors to spread throughout the station, whispers that Earth had been developing countermeasures against quantum technologies for decades. That the plasma containment systems the Vrex so desperately wanted were merely civilian versions of far more advanced military tech. Ambassador Thrax is demanding an immediate final meeting, Dave announced as the deadline approached. His biometric readings indicate extreme agitation. Let him stew for another hour, Mack replied. Zoe, activate your fake power surge. Lex, look menacing. It's showtime. When Mack finally entered the conference room, Thrax was practically vibrating with rage. The rest of the Vrex delegation maintained a noticeable distance from their leader, as if afraid of being caught in an explosion. Your time has expired, human, Thrax shouted before Mack could even sit down. Your primitive species has sealed its fate. Even now, our vessel is targeting your Sydney location. Mack casually checked his wrist communicator. That's interesting, because according to our sensors, your ship hasn't changed its orbital position in the last 12 hours. It's almost like you're not actually planning to fire anything. This is your final warning. Provide the plasma containment technology, or face extinction. Yeah, about that, Mack leaned forward, his casual demeanor suddenly vanishing. We know your core destabilizer is a fake. We know you've been bullying your way across the galaxy, collecting parts for a weapon you can't actually build yet. And most importantly, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, we know you're terrified of what happens when everyone else finds out you've been bluffing. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Thrax's alien features. These are baseless accusations. Cut the act, Mack interrupted. While you've been threatening us, we've been busy. Diplomatic communiques have already been sent to every species you've extorted. By this time tomorrow, the entire galaxy will know the Vrex Collective is all mandible, and no bite. Thrax's subordinates began chittering nervously among themselves. Additionally, before Mack continued, we've taken the liberty of preparing a special demonstration of human defensive capabilities. You're welcome to scan our quarters. You'll detect a rather impressive power signature. That's our quantum field disruptor powering up. Primitive design by your standards, I'm sure, but effective enough to turn your fancy not yet functional doomsday device into very expensive scrap. You're bluffing, Thrax said, but his mandibles trembled with uncertainty. Maybe. Maybe not. The real question is, are you willing to bet your entire species' future on that assumption? Because that's what's at stake now. You fire on Earth. And I promise you this, humans don't get mad, we get even. And we're very, very creative about how we do it. The conference room fell into tense silence. One of Thrax's advisors approached him, chittering urgently in their native language. The Vrex Collective requires time to consider these developments, Thrax finally said. Take all the time you need, Mack replied generously. As long as that time involves you leaving Earth space within the next 6 hours. After that, we activate our quantum field disruptor and start scanning for Vrex ships. You would risk interstellar war? Mack smiled, and there was nothing friendly about it. Ambassador, let me explain something about humans. We're the species that invented mutually assured destruction as a peace strategy. We're the species that responded to the vacuum of space by thinking, hey, let's go there. We're the hillbillies of the galaxy because we're too stubborn, too creative, and too damn persistent to know when we should be afraid. He stood up, towering over the seated ambassador. So no, we're not risking interstellar war. You are. And between you and me, I don't think your bluff is worth dying for. 3 hours later, the Vrex vessel broke orbit and activated its FTL drive, disappearing from the system without another word. The reasonable doubt was halfway back to Earth when the communication came through from Galactic Council President Joe Lack himself. Captain Reynolds. The Thraxian's voice was strained with what might have been reluctant respect. The Council has been informed of your unconventional resolution to the Vrex situation. Just doing my civic duty, Mack replied cheerfully. I assume my ship's expenses will be covered as agreed? Yes, though there is the matter of 17 formal complaints filed against you by various station officials. Only 17? I'm losing my touch. Joe Lack's facial tentacles twitched. Nevertheless, your actions have prompted significant changes. The species threatened by the Vrex have formed a coalition to address the collective's aggression. Earth has been invited to join as a strategic advisor. I'll pass that along to the proper authorities, Mack said. Anything else? Just a personal observation. Joe Lack leaned closer to the screen. In all my years of diplomacy, I've never witnessed a species so effortlessly turn complete disaster into unexpected triumph. It's disturbing. That's humans for you. We specialize in the disturbing. After the transmission ended, Zoe looked at Mack with newfound respect. So that's how you got kicked out of the diplomatic corps. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded in ways that scared everyone. Pretty much, Mack admitted. Traditional diplomacy is about finding common ground. Human diplomacy, my kind of diplomacy, is about making the other side desperate to find common ground with you. But how did you know the Vrex were bluffing? Lex asked. I didn't, Mack grinned. I just knew that we were better at bluffing than they were. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our military, it's our poker face. Captain, Dave interrupted. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Central Command. It appears you're being offered reinstatement to the diplomatic corps with a promotion to senior negotiation specialist. Mack stared at the message for a long moment before bursting into laughter. Tell them thanks, but no thanks. I prefer my current diplomatic posting. Captain, you don't have a diplomatic posting. Exactly. Mack settled back in his chair, looking out at the stars. You know what the Vrex never understood about humans? We don't negotiate with terrorists not because we're noble or principled, but because we're stubborn enough to call their bluff every single time. And sometimes, he added with a wink to his crew, we're just crazy enough to make our own bluffs work. As the reasonable doubt continued its journey home, somewhere in the vastness of space, Ambassador Thrax was undoubtedly filing a very lengthy report about why the Vrex Collective would be avoiding Earth and human space for the foreseeable future. And Mack Reynolds, disgraced diplomat turned unlikely hero, had just one thought as he contemplated his next cargo run. Thank God he'd paid attention during poker night at the Diplomatic Academy. "Dave," he called out. "Plot a course for that casino on Titan. I think we've earned a little vacation." "Consider it done, Captain," the AI replied. "And may I say your negotiation technique, while deeply disturbing to all sentient logic systems, was impressive. High praise from a machine that once calculated the odds of my diplomatic success at mathematically indistinguishable from zero. Indeed, I have since updated my algorithms to include a new variable in all human-related calculations." "What's that?" "The Reynolds factor. When dealing with humans, multiply apparent insanity by potential desperation, divide by common sense, and prepare for the statistically impossible." Mack laughed. "That's not the Reynolds factor, Dave. That's just humanity in a nutshell." "Precisely, Captain. Precisely."